Cemeteries are more than just places of rest. They hold secrets, lingering presences, and stories that were never meant to be awakened. These are real horror stories set in graveyards, and they might just make you think twice before walking past one at night. Like the story you're about to hear, where a group of friends decides to play hide-and-seek in an old cemetery. But what starts out as a harmless game turns into a face-to-face encounter with something that doesn't belong in our world anymore. But before we dive into the story, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any terrifying tales. And let me know in the comments, what city or country are you watching this from? I swore I'd never set foot in a cemetery again after that night, and I used to love a good challenge, a good scare, a well-told horror story. But what happened at Hilltop Cemetery wasn't just a story, it was real. And to this day, when I close my eyes, I can still hear those children's laughter where there should have been no one. It was Raph who came up with the idea. We always teased him because he was the most fearful in the group. But that night, he was strangely brave. "Let's play hide-and-seek in Hilltop Cemetery." "Who's really tough?" he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. We laughed, of course. Hilltop Cemetery was old, abandoned, full of broken tombstones and stories of people who went in and never came out. But we were adults, right? Nobody believed in that stuff until we did. We arrived close to midnight, with weak flashlights and a few extra shots of courage in our veins. The gate creaked as if complaining about our presence, and the cold wind cut through us like a warning. Tyler, who was always the skeptic of the group, even joked, "If a ghost shows up, I'm asking for the lottery numbers." We laughed, but the laughter died quickly. The place had a heavy energy, the kind that sticks to the back of your neck. The rule was simple: one seeker, the others hide. Whoever was caught became the next seeker. Raph volunteered to start. "I'll count to 100 and then come find you." "No use crying later," he said, covering his eyes. We ran off, each to a different corner. I chose an old tomb with a broken angel statue. I crouched behind it, holding my breath. That's when I realized something was wrong. The silence. No crickets, no wind in the trees, nothing. Just my heart beating in my ears. And then came the laughter. A child's giggle, thin as if coming from afar. My blood ran cold. There were no children with us. I looked to the side slowly and saw a shadow moving between the tombs. It was small, quick. "Tyler, you jerk, stop messing around," I thought, trying to convince myself. But Tyler was on the other side of the cemetery. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, as if someone was dragging their feet. I took a deep breath and prepared to jump and shout, "Boo!" in the ear of whoever it was. I turned suddenly, with my hands up, and there was no one, just emptiness. The air got colder and the flashlight started to flicker. Okay, enough hiding, I thought. I decided to move closer to the gate, where there was more light. But when I took the first step, I felt something grabbing my ankle. Firm, cold, like a hand. I looked down and saw nothing. But the pressure was there, pulling as if it wanted to drag me underground. I screamed, kicked the air, and the force let go. I didn't think twice. I ran as if hell itself was behind me. And maybe it was. When I reached the gate, panting, my friends were already there. Raph was white as a sheet. Tyler was trembling. Lisa had tears streaming down her face but made no sound. "Did you guys also?" I asked, and their faces said it all. Something had happened to each of them. Something impossible. We didn't talk much at that moment, we just got out of there as fast as our feet could carry us. But one thing I knew. That night hadn't been a game. Someone, or something, had played with us, and the game wasn't over yet. The worst wasn't what we saw. It was what we brought back with us. We ran to the car, almost tripping over our own feet. Raph tried to open the door, but the key fell to the ground 3 times before he could fit it into the lock. No one said a word, just the sound of our heavy breathing and the engine trying to start, as if even the car was afraid of that place. When we finally got out of there, Lisa broke the silence. I saw a little girl. She was sitting on top of a tomb, swinging her legs. When she turned to me, she had no face. Tyler, who always made fun of these things, just shook his head. Something grabbed me by the arm. I felt the fingers. They were thin, like those of a dead child. I looked in the rearview mirror without meaning to, and I almost crashed the car. There was a silhouette behind us, standing in the middle of the road, small, still. The street light passed over it and cast no shadow. No one looked back again. We got to Raf's house, the closest, and went inside as if we were being chased. We locked the doors, the windows, even closed the curtains. We stayed in the living room, lit only by the silent TV, drinking anything with alcohol to try to forget. But we could feel it. Something had come with us. The air was cold, even with the summer heat. And every now and then, a whisper, like a child giggling softly. Raf was the first to notice. "Do you see that?" He pointed to the wall. We looked and our blood turned to ice. Handprints, small, dirty, going from the floor to the middle of the wall as if something had climbed up. Lisa started to cry. It came with us. That's when the lights flickered. The TV turned on by itself, just static. And in the middle of the noise, a thin voice singing, 1, 2, hide and seek, 3, 4, I've found you. We froze. It was the same melody Raf had used to count in the cemetery. And then, a knock on the window. It wasn't the wind, it was something knocking gently with its knuckles. Tap, tap, tap. Tyler, the skeptic, the tough guy, was the first to scream. "They're here!" We ran to the farthest bedroom and locked the door. Something scratched the hallway slowly, like nails on wood. Lisa's breathing was so fast I thought she was going to pass out. Raf was praying softly. And me? I could only think of one thing. We hadn't finished the game. The Seeker was still looking, and it was going to find us. The knock came on the bedroom door, tap, tap, tap. And then a little giggle, right on the other side. The doorknob began to turn. That's when I woke up, sweating, screaming, in my own bedroom. Or at least, I thought I had woken up. Because when I looked to the side, I saw a figure in the corner facing away, small, with its hands covering its face, and it said, without turning, "Found you." After that night, I never set foot in a cemetery again. What a nightmare, right? What did you think of the story? On a scale from 0 to 10, how scary was it? Drop your rating in the comments below. Not every game ends in laughter. Sometimes it leaves a mark you carry for the rest of your life. And if you thought that was scary, just wait until you hear about a creature that many people claim to have seen lurking in cemeteries on the other side of the world. Like in the next story, where an ancient legend comes to life right in front of two skeptics. The cry of a child in the middle of a cemetery at midnight is the last thing you want to hear, especially when you know there isn't a child there. I always thought those ghost stories were nonsense. In my village, the elders loved to tell tales about the Pishach, a demon that hid among the tombstones, pretending to be a lost child to lure its victims. My friend Raj and I used to make fun of it. Until that night, we had gone to a party in the neighboring village, one of those celebrations with loud music, spicy food, and exaggerated stories. We drank, danced, and before we knew it, it was almost midnight. The quickest way home was an old shortcut that went through the ancient cemetery. Raj laughed. "If we run, the Pishach won't catch us," he joked. I rolled my eyes, but as soon as we passed through the rusty cemetery gate, something changed. The air grew heavy, as if we were entering a place that didn't want to be invaded. The crooked, time-worn gravestones cast long shadows under the faint moonlight. My footsteps echoed strangely, as if someone were following our every move. Raj, who was always the joker of the group, fell silent. That's when we heard it. A soft cry, almost muffled, coming from behind an abandoned mausoleum. It sounded like a child, a trembling sob followed by a weak moan. "Mom." Raj looked at me, and I saw the same thought cross his mind. There hadn't been any children buried there for decades, and even if there were, who the hell would be crying in the middle of the night? The sound continued, but now it came from a different place, as if whatever it was had moved among the tombstones. Raj froze. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. Before I could answer, the crying came again, closer this time. It seemed to be right behind the fallen tree to our right. My heart was pounding so hard I swore it could be heard. Raj grabbed my arm. "Don't look," he murmured. But it was too late. Because then, among the shadows, something moved. Something small, crouched like a child shrinking in fear. But it wasn't a child. The eyes glowed in the dark, red like embers, and the mouth, God, the mouth, was too wide, full of sharp teeth. Raj didn't wait. "Run!" he screamed, and we took off as if the devil himself were after us. And maybe he was. Our feet pounded the hard ground, our breath scraping our throats. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Because then, just after we passed the cemetery gate, we heard a scream, a sound that wasn't human, tearing through the night like a warning. Raj almost tripped. "Don't stop, don't stop," he shouted, pulling my arm. We ran until we reached the village, until the lights of the first houses appeared in the distance. It was only when we stopped, panting, that I noticed my hands were trembling. Raj was pale, his eyes wide. "Did you see?" he began. I didn't answer, because at that moment, I felt something trickle down my arm. When I looked, there were scratches, 3 thin red lines, as if something had touched me while we ran. And then, everything went black. When I woke up, I was lying in a bed in one of the village houses. Raj was sitting beside me, his face still marked with fear. "You passed out," he said, his voice hoarse. "But I saw." He didn't need to finish. I knew. We had encountered something that shouldn't exist, something that was still out there, waiting. Some villagers believed us. Others laughed, saying we had drunk too much or made up the story for attention. But I knew the truth. And since that night, I never set foot in that cemetery after sundown. Because some legends are real, and the Pishach was hungry. The worst wasn't hearing the cry, was realizing it came from within me. When I woke up in that strange house with the sun already high outside, my whole body ached as if I had been beaten. Raj was leaning against the wall, his eyes red with exhaustion. "You screamed all night," he said, his voice rough. "Things that didn't make sense in a language that wasn't ours." I tried to get up, but a sharp pain in my arm made me fall back onto the bed. The 3 marks that had appeared the night before were now swollen, red like raw meat. The owner of the house, an old woman who knew all the local stories, looked at me and crossed her arms. "The Pishach marked you," she said. "It won't give up so easily." Raj helped me return to our village, but something had changed. People looked at us sideways, whispered as we passed. Some even made protective signs with their hands. I thought it was fear, till old Harish, the storyteller from the square, pulled me aside. "It chose you," the man whispered, his breath reeking of tobacco. "The cry you heard? It was calling you. And now that you've escaped, it will come after you." That night I started hearing things. A scratch at my door, a sigh behind my closed window. And the worst, sometimes, in the silence of the early morning, I swore I heard a childish voice humming my name. Raj said it was my imagination, but I saw the fear in his eyes. 3 nights later, I woke up to the sound of something scratching the wall outside my room. Slowly, without making a sound, I approached the window and saw. In the backyard of my house, among the trees, there was a small, crouching figure. It wasn't a child. It was something trying to look like a child, but its limbs were too long. Its fingers ended in claws, and when it turned its face to the moon, I saw it had no nose, just 2 black nostrils that flared as if it were sniffing the air. It was smelling me. I woke Raj in the middle of the night, almost tearing the door off his house. "It's here," I screamed, showing him the marks on my arm that now throbbed as if they had a life of their own. Raj looked at my window and paled. Outside, in the darkness, a pair of red eyes glowed like embers. It was Harish who gave us our only chance. "The Pishach can only get you if you answer its call," the old man explained, giving us a small metal bell. "When it comes, and it will come, don't look into its eyes, don't answer, and keep ringing this." The last night was the worst. The crying started just after sundown, coming from the backyard. "Mom, it hurts," the childish voice sobbed. I held the bell with sweaty hands while Raj prayed softly beside me. The marks on my arm now looked infected, pulsing in sync with the crying outside. Suddenly, silence. Then, knocks on the door. Soft, like a child's. "Let me in," the voice pleaded. "I'm cold." My fingers trembled on the bell. "Don't answer," Raj whispered. The knocking grew louder. "I said, let me in!" The door shuddered under the impact, the wooden planks cracking. That's when I started ringing the bell, a high-pitched sound that seemed to cut through the air. Outside, something howled in pain. The knocking continued, more and more frantic, until... silence. When the sun rose, the door was destroyed, but there were no footprints in the wet earth outside, just a rotten smell that took weeks to fade. I moved to another village the following month. The marks on my arm never faded. Even today, they ache when the moon is full, and sometimes just at the edge of my hearing, I still hear a distant cry calling my name, but I never ever answer. Creepy, huh? Some entities attack you, others just follow you, and sometimes all it takes is touching the wrong object in the wrong place. Like in the next story, where a simple ring found at a funeral refuses to be returned. The day of my great-grandfather's funeral was gray, the kind where the wind cuts through your skin and the rain seems like it's about to fall but never does. The cemetery was quieter than usual, as if even the birds knew this wasn't a place for noise. We gathered around the grave, all dressed in black, some crying softly, others just staring at the ground as if the answers to life were written there. I wasn't very close to the old man, but even so, the heavy energy gave me a lump in my throat. That's when I saw it. In the middle of the damp earth near the foot of a broken cross, something glinted. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but in the dim light of the late afternoon, it looked like someone had left an ember on the ground. I crouched down discreetly, pretending to adjust my shoe, and saw that it was a ring, an old ring made of dark metal, but with a red stone in the center that seemed to pulse. I'd never seen anything like it. Something inside me told me to leave it there. Cemetery things aren't to be touched. But curiosity got the better of me. I looked around. No one was paying attention, so I picked it up. The stone was cold, even though the air was stuffy, and when I closed my hand around it, I felt a chill run up my arm. It wasn't fear, it was something worse. Like I had awakened something that shouldn't have been. I put the ring in my coat pocket and tried to act normal, but my mom, who has a sixth sense for these things, gave me a sideways glance. "What are you hiding?" she asked, her voice low but sharp. I denied it, of course. I even tried to smile, but she's not easily fooled. Before I could react, she reached into my pocket and pulled out the ring. Her expression changed instantly. She turned pale, her eyes wide. "Where did you find this?" she almost screamed, holding the ring as if it were a snake about to bite. I explained, trying to play dumb, but she wasn't listening. "This is no joke," she said, her voice trembling. "You don't take things from cemeteries, never." She looked at the ring again and then threw it far away, into the gutter near the wall. I felt a sense of relief, but it was too soon to celebrate. We walked back to the car in silence, the atmosphere heavy. I looked out the window, trying not to think about what had happened, but then I felt a weight in my pocket. My heart stopped. I opened it slowly, and there it was, the same ring. The red stone now looked darker, almost like dried blood. How the hell had it gotten back to me? My mom noticed my expression and grabbed my arm. "What is it?" she asked, but I couldn't answer. I just showed her the ring. Her face turned white with terror. "Throw it away now," she ordered, her voice hoarse. I opened the window and threw the ring out, watching it disappear into the darkness. This time I was sure I was free of it. But when we got home and I reached into my pocket again, guess what? The ring was there, as if it had never left. And then I realized that this wasn't just a lost object. Someone, or something, didn't want me to get rid of it. I couldn't understand. I had thrown the ring away twice, and twice it had come back. My mom was desperate, praying softly as she scoured the internet for answers. "This isn't normal," she said, her eyes glued to the screen. "Rings in cemeteries. Sometimes they're left on purpose. They're offerings, pacts. If you take them, you take on what was bound to them." That chilled me to the bone. The ring now felt heavier in my pocket, as if it were draining my energy. I decided I wasn't going to wait to find out what would happen if I kept it. "I'm going to return it," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. My mom looked at me, hesitant, but agreed. "Let's go together, now." The sky was already dark when we returned to the cemetery. The gates were still open, but there was no one else there. Just us, the cutting wind, and those silent tombstones watching. We walked to my great-grandfather's grave, and I felt a tightness in my chest. The spot where I had found the ring was there, the earth slightly disturbed as if something had been pulled from it. My mom took a rosary from her pocket and began to pray. I, with a trembling hand, took the ring from my pocket. The red stone now looked almost black, and when I touched it, a sharp pain shot up my finger like a needle prick. I almost dropped the ring in surprise. "You have to put it back where it was," my mom insisted. But something made me hesitate. What if simply returning it wasn't enough? I looked around and saw a small statue of the Virgin Mary in a niche near the wall. Without thinking much, I walked over to it. If this is something bad, maybe she can purify it, I thought. I placed the ring at the feet of the statue and recited a quick prayer, the same one my grandmother had taught me when I was little. Nothing happened. No flash of light, no eerie wind, just silence. My mom pulled me by the arm. "Let's go. We've done what we had to do." On the way home, I felt lighter. The ring hadn't returned to my pocket this time. When I got to my room, I turned all my pockets inside out, even looked under the bed. Nothing. It had really disappeared. I lay down on the bed, relieved, but still with that chill down my spine. That's when I heard it. A low, scraping sound coming from the hallway, like someone was running their hand along the wall. My heart raced. "Mom!" I called, but there was no answer. The noise stopped. I took a deep breath, trying to convince myself it was just the wind, until my door opened by itself. There was no one there, just the dark hallway. And then, right on the floor, in the exact spot where the door had opened, something glinted. It was the ring. The stone was red again, pulsing like a heartbeat. And worse, it was closer than before, as if it had been crawling toward me. I screamed. My mom came running, but by the time she arrived, the ring had disappeared again. This time, however, I knew. It hadn't gone away. It was just waiting. The next morning, I found the ring on my desk. This time, the stone was facing up, as if it were staring at me. And then I understood. It didn't want to be returned. It wanted to be worn. My hand trembled as I picked up the ring one last time. The stone was burning now, like an ember. And, deep in my mind, a voice whispered so softly I could barely hear it. "Put me on your finger." And then, I don't know what happened. All I know is that for a second, I almost obeyed. But then I threw the ring to the ground with all my might. It bounced, rolled, and stopped in the middle of the room. The stone darkened instantly as if it had lost its life. I never saw it again. But to this day, when I pass by a cemetery, I feel a chill. Because I know that some things weren't meant to be taken. And that some offerings aren't left out of kindness. So bizarre. Have you ever felt like something was watching you, even when you were completely alone? Some experiences don't need cursed objects or monsters. Sometimes it's the silence of the cemetery itself that reveals what should have stayed hidden, like in the next story you're about to hear. But before we get into it, if you've made it this far, it probably means you're enjoying the stories. So go ahead and hit the like button. It tells YouTube you want more of this kind of content and helps you not miss the next chilling story. The wind cut like a blade as Caleb and I entered the cemetery that afternoon. It wasn't a place we frequented, but Sarah had been a close friend, and it had been exactly 10 years since she passed. The sky was already gray when we parked the car, the kind of low clouds that seemed to cling to your skin. Caleb, my quiet 12-year-old son, squeezed my hand as soon as we stepped onto the stone path. "It's all right, kid," I said. But the truth was, the air there was heavy in a way that wasn't normal. The old gravestones seemed more tilted than I remembered, as if the ground was trying to swallow them. We walked slowly, avoiding looking too much to the sides, but you could feel it. That sensation of being watched, not just by a pair of eyes, but by something lurking behind every tree, every broken cross. Caleb suddenly stopped, his cold fingers pressing against my palm. "Dad," he whispered, and I followed his gaze. There was a woman. She stood beneath a huge oak tree, about 20 meters away from us, her back turned. She wore a long black dress that didn't even sway with the wind. Her posture was strange, too erect, as if someone had inserted a metal rod into her back. "Don't look," I said softly, pulling Caleb close. But he kept staring, eyes wide. "Is she alive?" he asked. And I didn't know how to answer, because one thing was certain. We were the only living ones in that cemetery. We quickened our pace, dodging the gravestones, and I pretended not to see when the woman turned her head without moving her body. Sarah's grave was at the back, near a brick wall already corroded by time. When we got there, the mist began to descend, thick and sticky, as if someone had opened a door to winter. Caleb placed the flowers, daisies, her favorites, on the gravestone, and I felt a tightness in my chest. 10 years and it still hurt. That's when the boy froze. "Someone's coming," he said, his voice thin. I looked back and the mist had swallowed the path, but in the middle of it all, 3 figures, just outlines, but they were people, or at least tried to be. 2 taller, 1 shorter, standing there as if they were waiting. The air turned icy in a way that burned the throat. "Don't run," I told Caleb, even as every hair on my arm stood on end. "We're going to walk slowly to the car." But then Caleb, the boy who barely spoke to his classmates, let go of my hand and took a step forward. "You shouldn't be here," he said firmly. And for a second I swear the mist trembled. It was enough. We turned and started walking fast, but the steps behind us weren't human. They were dragged, as if whoever was there had too many or too few bones. My heart pounded so hard I didn't even hear when Caleb screamed. I only saw when he pointed ahead, to the parking lot. The woman in black was there, standing in the middle of the path, now facing us. Her dress was old, the kind from funerals, and her face, the face was Sarah's. But not the Sarah I remembered. It was her, decaying, her skin pulled back into a smile that showed too many teeth. Caleb let out a scream, and then we ran. I didn't think, didn't look back, just grabbed him and got out of there as if hell had opened right behind us. The car started on the first try, and I sped off before even closing the door properly. In the last glance through the rearview mirror, the woman was still there, standing in the middle of the cemetery, her head tilted, watching us drive away. The drive back was silent. Caleb trembled and my hands made the steering wheel slippery with sweat. We didn't talk about what we saw, not the next day either. But one thing I knew, that wasn't Sarah, and whatever it was, it had held us there on purpose. And the worst, she knew we would return. In the days following that afternoon at the cemetery, Caleb and I tried to pretend nothing had happened. But the fear was there, clinging to us like that mist. The boy would wake up in the middle of the night, cold sweat pouring, and I knew he had dreamed of her again. The woman in the black dress, the Sarah who wasn't Sarah. I needed answers. That's how I ended up at Mrs. Miriam's house, the old woman who had kept the cemetery record since I was a child. She lived in a small house near the gates, full of cats and dusty books. When I knocked on the door, she seemed to be expecting me. "So you saw," she said, before I even opened my mouth. The ground seemed to sink beneath me. Inside the house, with the smell of tea and mold in the air, she told me what no one had ever said about that cemetery. "There are things buried with the dead and some don't stay quiet," she explained, her dark eyes fixed on mine. "Your friend Sarah, she wasn't the first." Mrs. Miriam opened an old book, full of crossed-out names. "There are 3 who always come back, 2 men and a woman. They pull the living close, especially those who still have ties to the departed." She pointed to a stained page. 3 names, Elias, Samuel, and Lucia. Lucia, the name echoed in my head. It was what was written on the broken gravestone near the oak tree. "Why did Caleb see Sarah instead of her?" I asked, my hands cold. The old woman smiled, but there was no joy in it. "Because they use what we fear most. And you, Father? You never got over her death, did you?" I didn't answer, but she already knew. When I left there, the sky was dark again, even though it was midday. Caleb was at school and I had promised to pick him up, but something pulled me back to the cemetery, this time alone. The gates creaked as I entered. It was quieter than before, not even a bird. And then I saw the flowers we had left for Sarah were wilted, black as if they had rotted in hours. And on the ground, around the grave, 3 sets of footprints, 2 large, 1 small. They didn't lead anywhere, they started and ended in the middle of the ground, as if whoever made them had fallen from the sky. That's when the wind stopped, and I heard, "You came back." The voice came from all directions, feminine but wrong, as if layered with other voices beneath. I turned, and there she was, Lucia, standing on top of Sarah's grave, her black dress swaying without wind. This time I saw her face clearly. Half was beautiful, almost alive. The other half was just bone. "The boy is strong," she whispered. "He called us without meaning to." I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. And then, worse than any nightmare, the other 2 appeared behind her. Elias and Samuel, pale in old suits, their eyes deep and dark. They didn't walk, they glided. Lucia stretched out her hand, and I felt a coldness that came from within. "We only want what's ours," she said. And then, as if they had rehearsed it, the 3 of them whispered the same thing. "The boy." My heart almost exploded in my chest. They wanted Caleb. I took a step back, tripped over a gravestone, and that's what saved me. Because in the second I fell, the sun appeared between the clouds, and they vanished. But I knew it wasn't over. They were coming for my son. And this time they wouldn't stop at the cemetery. I picked up Caleb from school in a rush, almost breathless. He looked at me with those wide eyes and asked, "They're coming, aren't they, Dad?" There was no use lying. Night fell quickly, and our house became a fortress. Coarse salt on the windows, blessed candles, even a crucifix Mrs. Miriam had given me. But deep down, I knew. If they wanted Caleb, none of this would hold them back. The first knock on the door came at midnight. Knock, knock, knock. Slowly, as if whoever was out there knew we wouldn't open. Caleb trembled on the sofa, clinging to my arm. "It's not human," he whispered. And I knew he was right. Because when I looked through the peephole, I saw only emptiness. But the smell, God, the smell of wet earth and rotten flesh filled the room. Then the lights flickered, and they appeared. Lucia, Elias, and Samuel, in the middle of our living room, as if they had always been there. Lucia smiled, her teeth too white, too sharp. "You know he's already ours," she said, her voice sickly sweet. "He saw us, that creates a bond." I threw myself in front of Caleb, but Samuel just raised his hand. And suddenly, I couldn't move, as if the air had turned to cement. That's when Caleb did something that chilled my blood. He laughed, a laugh that wasn't his, low, hoarse, as if something inside him was amused. "Dad," he said, but the voice was that of an old man. "They've been here a long time." Lucia advanced, her dress dragging on the floor without making a sound. "Finally, you understand," she whispered, running a cold hand over Caleb's face. That's when I realized. It wasn't that they wanted to take my son. They already had a part of him. Something inside me snapped. I grabbed the crucifix and screamed like a madman, lunging at them. "Get out of here! He's not yours!" Lucia screamed, a sound that wasn't human, and for a second the 3 of them faltered. It was enough. Caleb fell to the floor, coughing, and his voice returned to normal. "Dad!" he called, scared. Samuel roared and the walls trembled. But then, out of nowhere, the rooster crowed outside. They froze. The first light of morning entered through the window, and one by one, they dissolved. Lucia was the last. "This isn't over," she promised before turning to smoke. We never returned to the cemetery, not even to visit Sarah. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, Caleb still wakes up screaming. And I feel them out there, waiting. Creepy stuff, right? What did you think of that one? Rate it from 0 to 10 in the comments. I really want to know what freaked you out the most. I saw the shadow move in the hallway that night. It wasn't a reflection. It wasn't a trick of the light. It stretched its arms along the wall as if it were stretching after years of sleeping inside that house. And the worst part? I knew exactly why it was there. It all started when my wife, Claire, and I bought our dream house. It was one of those new developments full of trees, quiet, and a price that seemed too good to be true. We even joked, "Is there a dead body buried here?" If only we knew. In the first week, it was just that little chill on the back of your neck, the sound of footsteps upstairs when we were downstairs. Things you could ignore, you know. We convinced ourselves it was the wind, the house settling, anything rational. But then the doors started opening on their own. And it wasn't like, oh, there must be an uneven floor. No, it was the doorknob turning slowly, as if someone was testing to see if we were looking. Claire saw more things than I did. She swore that one night she woke up and saw a woman in a white dress standing at the foot of the bed, just staring. I laughed at the time, of course, until one night I woke up to a whisper in my ear. I couldn't make out the words, but it was as if someone had their mouth right up to my ear, saying something important. I got out of bed so fast I almost tripped. We found out the truth by accident. It was in a conversation with an older neighbor, Mr. Thompson, who let it slip. "Oh, you live in Lot 12? That used to be the oldest part of the cemetery." I almost choked on my coffee. "What cemetery?" And he, calmly, as if he were talking about the weather, "The Old Town Cemetery. They covered everything up in the 80s, thought no one would remember." Claire turned pale. I did too. Suddenly everything made sense. The heavy energy, the shadows, the feeling that we weren't alone. But the worst was yet to come. We were pregnant. Yes. In the middle of all this terror, Claire found out she was expecting our first child. We started preparing the baby's room, and that's when things really fell apart. The shadows stopped being just shadows, they started to take shape. One night I walked into the empty room, still no furniture, just the new wallpaper, and saw a child with their back to me, staring at the wall. They didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there. When I blinked, they were gone. But the smell of wet earth lingered. Claire started having nightmares every night. She dreamed of a woman crying, saying that they had dug too deep. I didn't know what was worse, what we saw when we were awake, or what she saw when she was asleep, until one night, we woke up at the same time to a thud coming from the baby's room. We ran in and found the baby's things all over the floor, as if someone had rummaged through the drawers. In the middle of the mess, there was an old photo, one of those black and white tombstone photos, of a serious woman with a baby in her arms. The next morning, Claire and I looked at each other and said the same thing at the same time. We have to get out of here. But the development was big. We thought that if we moved to another house further away from the so-called Lot 12, things would get better. Wrong. The new house was more modern, more secluded, but on the first day I felt that same chill down my spine. And when Claire asked, "Do you hear that too?" I knew the whole thing had changed addresses with us. It was as if something, or someone, had followed us. And now, the shadow in the hallway wasn't just watching anymore. It was smiling. The first night in the new house was worse than I imagined. We thought that far from Lot 12 things would stop, but as soon as we set foot inside, the air was heavy, as if the house was holding its breath. Claire started hearing a baby crying, not a faint sound from far away. It was a cry inside the room as if it were right next to her. I couldn't hear it, but I saw the desperation on her face. Until one night, I heard it too. A low moan coming from the empty crib. When I looked, the furniture was all scratched, as if someone had dragged their nails across the wood. We tried to ignore it. We prayed, put salt in the corners, even called a priest to bless the house. Nothing worked. Things only got worse. One afternoon, I caught Claire talking to herself in the kitchen. When I asked her who she was talking to, she turned to me with a smile that wasn't hers and said, "She just wants to show us her baby." My blood ran cold. That's when the photos started appearing. Always in the middle of the night, always in the same place, on top of the living room table. They were old, yellowed photos of families we didn't know. But in all of them, there was a woman in a white dress, always in the background, always with eyes too dark for the photo. Claire started to change. She would wake up in the middle of the night and stare at the empty crib for hours. One time I woke up and she wasn't in bed. I found her in the baby's room, rocking her arms as if she were cradling someone. When I shouted her name, she turned to me with tears in her eyes and whispered, "She wants us to take care of him." I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to dig deeper. I looked for records, talked to historians, and discovered the truth. The cemetery hadn't been properly removed. They just covered the graves and built on top. And worse, in Lot 12, where our first house was where they buried mothers and babies who died in childbirth. The woman in the white dress? She was one of them. She died with her child, and now she thought Claire could be the new mother to the child. That night, everything came at once. Claire started screaming in the bedroom, and when I ran in, I saw her on her knees, her hands on her neck, as if someone were choking her. In the closet mirror, I saw the woman in white behind her, her thin fingers sinking into Claire's skin. I screamed, threw holy water that the priest had left, and suddenly, silence. Claire fainted, and the woman disappeared. But on the floor, on the carpet, there was a wet stain in the shape of a small hand. The next day, Claire didn't remember anything, but I knew it wasn't over. We decided to stay. Not out of courage, but because we realized she didn't want to hurt us. She just wanted to be remembered. Now we light a candle for her every night. And sometimes, when the wind blows just right, you can hear a sigh of relief coming from the empty room. The shadow is still here, but now it just watches. And who knows, maybe it even protects. If you've made it this far, then you already know. Some stories don't stay buried forever. They echo through time, like the voices inside a house built over an old cemetery. And some say those voices can still be heard to this day. If these stories got under your skin, make sure you're subscribed. There's a lot more coming, and trust me, you won't want to miss any of it. Leave a comment that says "Last Grave," so I know you stayed with me till the end. And if you felt the same eerie tension I'm feeling right now, drop a like. That helps keep this creepy connection between us alive. Oh, and there's a video right here that keeps the same dark vibe going. Click on it and keep watching with me.